So I'm going to jump in right here, and then because I think there's a lot of ideas that were expressed during that time period, and the whole idea of this forum is to give the volunteers, people out there, an understanding of the process so they know how to get involved.
Right.
I'm going to start off with the first thing you said, the SWAT teams, the legal SWAT teams.
Right.
One of the things, too, you captured it, on Election Day, we don't know what's going on in real time. So a lot of things I saw, especially as I was going from precinct to precinct, is that we didn't have enough volunteers on our side
Exactly.
to even point out if we need to have our SWAT team come and sit upon that precinct. So first step, if you're looking for something to do, especially on Election Day, be there at the polls, whether you're passing out sample ballots or you're an observer, and you can, and I found this out not too long ago, you can become an election official.
Yes, and you get paid to be an election
You
official.
get paid to be an election official. Yep. And that becomes very important, especially when you talk about recounts, because the observers who are on election day, the election officials on election day, are the ones who participate in the recount as well.
As the officers of the election.
As an officers of election.
And who hires the election officials?
The Department of Elections.
Well,
For that city, that jurisdiction?
So there's
Both
local
registrars,
registrars process. And by
Yeah.
the way, to this point, and this is very important, I'm glad you brought it up, local registrars, especially in the rural areas of Virginia, scramble to find people.
Yeah.
And it's not, it doesn't have to be like a resume thing. It just kind of depends on like an application process that you could probably speak more to the nitty gritty of it. But, it's not an age requirement necessarily as long as you're a legal age citizen.
And no offense
yeah,
to the professor in my profession, you do not have to be a lawyer.
No, absolutely not. No.
No, in fact-
College students,
in fact, it
high school
helps-
students if they're old enough.
It helps.
That's right.
It helps probably not to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to be a registered voter in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Both political parties in the spring suggest officers of election. There is almost always a shortfall. Any citizen can contact the general registrar of the county and city in which they live and volunteer to be an officer of election. I almost guarantee that if you volunteer, you will be accepted. You go through a training process that is, I think, very comprehensive, but is very easy to follow. You are paid for election day, and it's part of the civic duty. My wife has been a officer of election when we lived in Alexandria, and she found it one of the more exciting things that she has done. Probably one of the more exciting things in our marriage was her being an officer of election. But it's a great experience, and it is also, I think, one of the obligations that we each have as a citizen.
And what does that look like as an elections officer? Because, anyone who's been to a precinct and goes through their vote, that there's like different checkpoints. And it's different by locality. So, for example, in Richmond, we have to, depending on which precinct you go to, there's a person who stands there, checks your ID. And you go to another person, they print out a little ticket for you. Then you go to another one, and you give the person a ticket. And then you go to another person, they give you a ballot. And then you go over there, and there's another person who stands there to make sure everything went okay with you if there's any questions. Those are the election officers.
Those are the officers.
None of them necessarily are experts. They don't have to have a degree in this. They can just be normal people. And in terms of kind of revolving around this conversation when it comes to, we've gone into how the parties can protect themselves, that the campaigns can protect themselves from this confusion. There is a certain amount of personal accountability you can hold yourselves to.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm not trying to, by any means, because I mentioned at the top of this before you got here. It's nice to meet you, by the way.
The great Ken.
The great Kenny. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sitting down. I can't bow right now, so. But
we'll disavow the formality.
You're wearing a ring. We'll get that to later. But what I mean by that is, one of the things that has been more of a new trend is making a plan to vote.
Right.
And there's a lot of online
Yes.
tools, whether it's the Department of Elections, there's a tool that we use called Ballot Ready where you just type in your address and it has information, nonpartisan information from our side of things that list all the candidates and exactly from the top down, from the governor all the way to the comptroller if that was in your locality, sheriff's department, that's anything you want. And that's how you can know at those times what happened with Josh Cole's race. Like, this doesn't look right based off my plan to vote. They also find that making a plan to vote drives up turnout by at least 4%. Mm-hmm. And we might, 4%, that's not a lot, but when we're talking about the Shelley Simons race, that was one vote. Yeah. One vote made the difference.
Can I ask a favor?
Sure, what do you need?
Can I be a moderator too?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
For the people who are watching this, they may not know all the nuances of the Josh Cole.
Sure.
Can you tell the folks watching this, what happened in the Josh Cole race?
So
Exactly.
Actually,
Just
I'm gonna take real
mechanical.
quick. We're gonna pause right here because
Yeah,
that's a great
break.
place to take a quick break.
Break.
We're gonna come right back. We're gonna lead off with that story.
okay, great. Yeah.
So at the end of the last segment, we kind of talked a little bit about your question in terms of what happened in each of the races. And I think
Yes.
that's a great point to start off on here.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and just give a quick overview of the three recounts. We'll start off with my race, just to let everybody know, since it was just how the process worked correctly, I would say. During my race, again, like I mentioned earlier, I was up ahead by 68 votes on election night. During the canvasses we talked about beforehand, what that process involves, they found out there were some transcribing errors. There was an Excel spreadsheet error in one case. Basically, again, there was nothing funny about it. It was just a human error, and they caught it during that process. And there was a 183 vote swing. So again, nothing nefarious about it at all. I didn't lose 183 votes, but it did kind of feel that way. But nothing wrong with my recount. People were confused by that earlier. There was no foul play. However, I want to talk a little bit about Josh Cole's race, if you wouldn't mind explaining the story.
Sure. So Joshua Cole, who ran in District 28, which is down in Stafford County, Virginia, against Bob Thomas. So we went into election day, and a lot of folks didn't realize it was going to be a close election to begin with, and that we can talk through to the concept of party not putting in enough resources later about that. But more of the story. The original, when the election day count came, there was a 3-digit difference between Bob Thomas and Joshua Cole. After the recount, it was about like 73, 74 votes between them. On election day itself, there was already indications of some irregularities. As mentioned previously, we had folks go to their normal precinct, which they had been registered to vote for years, and they knew that they were in the 28th district. However, when they went and presented their ID, they did everything right, they were suddenly given a ballot for the 88th district, or in some cases, the 2nd district. There are 3 districts that are sort of in this same general area. And so some folks didn't really know what was going on because, unfortunately, in the neighboring district, the 88th, there was a Republican with the same last name of Cole as Joshua Cole, who was the Democrat in the 28th. So that added to the comedy of errors there. But folks knew either because of the Joshua Cole campaign or because they had voted there for so long, they were given the wrong ballot. However, when they try to contest this with the folks that were in the at the precinct, they were either just denied, told, "Hey, this is your ballot. Either take it or leave it." Some folks went in and showed the folks in the precinct, "Hey, this is where I live. This is the boundary of the district per your own maps. I'm clearly inside of it." And eventually, the maps were torn down by some folks. And we come to find out that at least after everything was said and done that we're aware of currently, there was about twice the amount of people of the difference between the two candidates. So you have about 73, 74 between Bob Thomas and Joshua Cole. About 147 or so were issued the wrong ballot. They were either issued the ballot and they lived in the 28th and they were given an 88th or a 2nd district, or they lived in one of those other districts and they were given a ballot for the 28th. And unfortunately, this could have swung the election. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is there's also a set of provisional ballots that was never really counted. There's a set of absentee ballots, which the registrar originally claimed that the folks that sent in these absentee ballots sent them in late and they were never at the post office. We come to find out later that that's not true either, that they came to the post office box on election day, but they never bothered to go and to the post office box and get them out. So there's even a much larger set of votes out there of people that did the right thing. They tried to do what they were supposed to do in order to vote, but their votes were not counted. And in some cases, it might not matter because of just the huge number of votes between the candidate that lost and the candidate that won. But in the case of the 28th, there's probably 3 to 4 times the number of votes that weren't counted properly than between the two candidates.
And so, Kenny, the question then is the appropriate remedy.
Sure.
And here's where I think that the case we talked about earlier, Hunter, provides an answer. Clearly, there's mistreatment of voters at the hands of state officials. And it seems to me that one of the real problems in the litigation in the 28th is that an appropriate remedy wasn't found.
Correct.
And it looks like the most appropriate remedy would have been a new election.
Yes.
In fact, the Washington Post advocated for it. And I think anyone who looked at the facts would have been led to believe that the problems were imposed by maladministration of the state. And when that happens, clearly there's an equal protection violation that needs a remedy. Unfortunately, the federal judge and the Court of Appeals affirmed him, did not view the problem in that vein, and did not believe that there was a widespread systemic issue which could have led to the remedy. The problem is even one ballot that goes astray needs a remedy, and particularly here, provisional ballots needed to be put in place. And I think, as Gene has mentioned, we needed a SWAT team that was addressing this in a legal way at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Was anybody there? I don't want to be a Monday morning quarterback.
No.
Were there any party officials or volunteers there to see these hiccups and to help those individuals who were pointing to the map?
So, from my understanding, there weren't.
Okay.
We know that there were some volunteers in other precincts that were handing out sample ballots and things like that. And there were some at that particular precinct earlier on in the day and later on in the day. But
Yeah.
when things started to go wrong and people started to raise the red flag, there really weren't any SWAT team, lawyers, or even party officials that were there.
Why
that
not?
were- frankly, there's any number of reasons. I am not super familiar with the Stafford County Democrats or the Fredericksburg City Democrats, but I know that, especially once you get farther down than Prince William County, it's an issue we talked about earlier, which, same thing with your election officials, there's just so few bodies there.
Exactly.
And especially as we talked about earlier, with Election Day being a work day for everyone, basically, unless they take off work or unless they work in one of the schools that's that's a polling location, people would have to take leave from their job in order to volunteer to pass out sample ballots, or to be an election official, or to be a poll watcher, or whatever, what have you.
And do we know what time of day it was? Because I live in Alexandria. I'm sorry you left. But
Now you know why.
that hurts my feelings. That hurts my feelings. But you got me distracted.
Right.
But no, when I was doing handing out ballots on election days passed around, our precinct is very busy.
Sure.
In Alexandria, the one where I live there. And in the morning and at night, it's hopping.
Right.
But during the day, it's dead.
Right.
So you won't have the SWAT team, you won't have even a person handing out ballots. So if they didn't vote at a particular time, like the morning or night, you don't know if that's one of the reasons.
Right.
too.
And we